What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 10 Stone. Chapter 151 Feeling Embarrassed. Fushi Hu Pan Lu Guan Hula Yusu Fushi Yin Jing Rakuten Travel HK, 1,275 Hong Kong dollars Rakuten Travel, Ri Ben Xing Ne Ling Xian Wang Shang Lu Xing Shi. The conversation was interrupted. Lockhart kept a consistent smile on his face. Looking around at the Lockhart fans, there were indeed a few laughing softly, but no one came to him. Of course, Hermione is also among these few people. Anyone who is not blind can tell that she is a fan of Lockhart. Lockhart never seemed to feel embarrassed. He looked at the students who were barely smiling, and the smile on his face did not diminish at all. On the contrary, when he said this, his smile became even brighter. I saw you all bought I have a whole set of my books, which is a very good thing. I thought we could do a little quiz today. Don't be afraid. Not at all, because I just want to see if you, 503, people have read it. How did you read my book and did you understand what I wrote? Lockhart picked up a stack of test papers from the podium behind him, distributed them to the students in the front row in turn, and asked them to distribute them to the students in the back row. When he saw that all the students had distributed them, he immediately said, "Okay, now I'll give you 30 minutes to do this test paper, so hurry up and do it." Blaze opened the newspaper and found that it was full of questions about Lockhart himself. What color Lockhart likes, what is Lockhart's ambition, etc. As he looked at it, Blaze's face appeared black line. He turned around and wanted to spit it out with Shane, but when he turned around, he suddenly found that his good friend and brother Shane, a ruthless guy who would beat you up whenever he asked and didn't even break, was writing quickly in the newspaper. "What are you wearing? Are you serious?" Without looking back, Shane continued to write and draw on the paper in front of him, and replied, "Of course it's true, I didn't answer all the questions just now greater than they all make sense. You don't like that guy Lockhart either, do you?" Of course not. During this period of socializing, I have lost all good impressions of Lockhart, and I even doubt whether the impression described in Lockhart's book is true. I'm not saying that these experiences themselves are true or false, I just want to know whether these experiences were personally experienced by Lockhart. After all, he is completely different from the person written in the book. Not only does he not pay attention to the surrounding environment, he also has some qualities. Not even as good as me, so I suspect that the experiences written in his book are probably other people's experiences and made up by him. Zero. But these are not important. In fact, the stories in his book inspired me a lot. Some details were very helpful to me and gave me a direction when encountering similar situations in the future. So after buying the entire set of his books, I detailed I have read it many times, so the questions in this test paper are not difficult for me. Quote. While watching Shane speak, Blaze painfully wrote down all the questions. After thinking for a while, he hurriedly copied the answers from Shane's test paper. He doesn't need high scores, but he can't have 0 scores, right? Half an hour later, the papers were picked up one by one and they were read immediately in front of all the little wizards, making smacking sounds while reading. Tisk 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 tisk. Almost no one remembers that my favorite color is lilac, of course very few, but not none. I mentioned it in my book, A Year with XZ Snowman. Some of you should read Wandering with the Werewolf more carefully. I explicitly mentioned in chapter 12 of the book that I gave Li Shang a birthday gift. All magical and non-magical things get along well, but I wouldn't mind a big bottle of Ogden-aged fire whiskey. As soon as he finished speaking, Lockhart looked at the students in front of him again and winked at them mischievously. This made Brett almost vomit, and Shane sighed helplessly. This is very strange. Just then, Shane was surprised to hear Lockhart calling his name. Where are Mr. Shane Burstead and Miss Hermione Granger? When Hermione heard Lockhart calling her name, she immediately raised her arm, stretching it as high and straight as a flagpole, for fear that Lockhart wouldn't be able to see her. Shane also raised his arm slightly so that Luo Yinshi could see her. As soon as he saw Shane and Hermione, Lockhart immediately smiled and said, "Very good. You two are very good. You answered all my questions. You know that my secret ambition is to eliminate evil. You know that I want to sell my own protective clothing. Hair serum series, this is so nice guys and gals, so you get paid 100% for your work, it's so breathtaking. 100% required. So you two win 10 points each for Slytherin and Gryffindor. This is probably the most boring class one have ever taken, even more boring than Professor Bin's History of Magic. At least Professor Binz's class can make me fall asleep, but Lockhart's class, I even listened to him I couldn't sleep due to the sound. Don't worry, I promise I'll be able to show you some entertainment in a few minutes." 2.7 Upon hearing this, Blaze immediately looked at Shane and asked in a low voice, with a shrewd expression on his face, "I know you won't read Lockhart's book in vain, what do you want to do?" Nothing special. This is a defense against the dark arts class. As a professor, he should naturally teach us defense against the dark arts well. If he is passive and slow in his work, then as a student, I have the responsibility and obligation to supervise him in fulfilling his duties as a defense against the dark arts professor. Responsibilities make him a qualified professor. When Blaze looked at Shane, A malicious smile appeared on his face, and Lockhart's expression gradually became malicious. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 152 Shane's Fist. So, everyone, be careful. I am the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, and my job is to teach you how to deal with dangerous and evil things. Next, I will show you the most terrifying things in the wizarding world, but you don't have to be afraid. There is no need to be afraid, because as long as I am here, you will not be harmed in any way. Please stay calm and see how I deal with these evil things. After saying these words, Lockhart placed a large cage with lights on the podium, stood mysteriously next to the cage, lowered his voice and said to the students, I must ask you not to yell. This moment make them angry, so please be quiet, and next I will introduce you to this horrible thing. Cornish elf. As soon as Lockhart finished speaking, Shane heard a very clear sound of laughter coming from many places. The sound was so loud that even Lockhart himself could not believe that it was a terrifying scream. It was because he looked at 07 in horror. The elf of Walsh County, a cunning and terrifying little destroyer like the devil. Lockhart reached up and lifted the gleaming cloth from the cage. Shane looked at these livid little elves with pointed faces, pointed ears, and yellow bristles, making piercing screams. They really looked like the legendary devils. He suddenly thought, are these little guys really related to the devil? Relationship, what would he gain if he fought one of these devices? Seeing Shane jump up, Lockhart slammed the door of the cage, and the little devil-like Cornish elves in the cage jumped out of the cage crazily, picked up the students' belongings and threw them around. Or throw it directly at others. There were even several Cornish elves who grabbed Neville by the ears and hung him from the chandelier above the classroom. Lockhart raised his wand, trying to pretend to be as clumsy as ever, but Shane obviously didn't give him this chance. After all, in Shane's opinion, any one of these Cornish elves can become a duelist, and they can all fight for it. He brings some skills or talents. 10,000 bullets. Shane pulled out his wand and waved it in front of him. At this moment, the books, quills and other items thrown everywhere by the Sogdian elves flew up from the ground and table, and quickly turned into he picked up a palm-sized falcon and swung it at one of the Sogdian elves. The 10,000 bullets spell can turn objects into animals to attack targets, and has a very strong effect on creatures such as Cornish elves. The falcon flew up and down, and its sharp claws easily grabbed a Sogdian elf, and threw it to the ground with a wave of its hand, making it completely unconscious. Some unlucky Sogdian elf were hunted by two or more. The eagle caught it and tore it into pieces. The stumps and blood fell from the air and splashed on the ground. In an instant, all the Cornish elves were under Shane's spell. Shane left his seat and waved his wand to send the living Cornish elves back to the cage. As for the dead elves, the purification spell had completely solved their problems. Reaching out to close the cage, Shane looked at the obviously embarrassed Lockhart, resisted the urge to walk to the panel where the clues had been scrolled a dozen times, smiled and said to Lockhart, Professor Lockhart, please forgive me. After hastily using magic to deal with these Cornish elves, I believe you have a more reliable way to deal with them. Looking at Shane, Lockhart immediately showed his signature smile, nodded repeatedly and said, Mr. Shane, Mr. Belstead, the only student who received perfect marks. It seems that your understanding of me goes far beyond the scope of Zuo. I have a more suitable way to deal with these Cornish elves, which is definitely better than what you just did. After all, the magic you just performed was too cruel. I'm certainly not criticizing you, I'm just saying that we could have used a softer strategy, couldn't we? Perhaps as Lockhart said, Shane's current methods are indeed a bit rough, causing Lockhart to be cautious when talking to Gen N. As you said, Professor, you have better ways to handle this matter, but because I have influenced you, Professor, your method of handling this matter cannot be taught to everyone. I am deeply sorry for this, so I feel that all this must be solved, and I will act as Professor's opponent. Please use the methods you just mentioned to deal with me, so that everyone can learn the methods, Professor, you are willing to teach us. Lockhart looked at Shane. The smile on his face was a little stiff. He didn't know why this conversation suddenly changed from bragging to wanting to fight with him. Looking at Shane, who had taken a step back and was about to express his position, Lockhart said hurriedly, Mr. Shane Belstead, the nature of magic is very dangerous. I'm worried that it will hurt you. This is not a good idea. Without giving Lockhart a chance to refuse, Shane immediately said, Professor Lockhart, the magic you mentioned is relatively mild. I think it won't hurt me. Besides, I won't complain even if I get hurt. Hogwarts there is a school hospital, and Madame Pomfrey's medical skills are also very good, so please rest assured. 860. Besides, I think everyone wants to see you in your prime, Professor Lockhart. As soon as these words came out, Shane immediately glanced at Blaze, and by the way glanced at Harry and Ron. The latter immediately understood and immediately clapped their hands, while Malfoy and Millicent, who had not been very famous recently, did not understand how Shane could do this. They suddenly lost their minds, but they didn't quite understand Lockhart's temper. However, since Shane wanted to take the initiative to let Lockhart teach him, of course they were happy. When they thought of this, they immediately clapped their hands and cheered. Seeing one person clapping and applauding, and then more than half of the students, Lockhart was weak, but his vanity was fully mobilized, and there was no way to retreat. He reached out and pulled out the wand, raised his head slightly and said, Since Mr. Shane Belstead, you and others want to see what I can do, I won't watch, but you must be careful and don't let me hurt you. Professor Lockhart, please. Before Lockhart could finish reciting the spell, Shane waved his wand and pointed it at Lockhart. Following his spell, a red light flashed instantly and hit Lockhart's chest, knocking him away. His body hit the cabinet behind him heavily, and for an instant there was silence in the classroom. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 153 The Curse of the Bone Demon. Shinsu Groove Bin Liaju Dian Rakuten Travel HK, 1037 Hong Kong dollars Rakuten Travel, Ri Ben Xing Ne Ling Xian Wang Shang Lu Xing Shi. Just when everyone was shocked that Lockhart was knocked away before he could take action, Shane opened the panel. He was too lazy to see what abilities these Sogdian elves had given him. Instead, he pulled the panel to the bottom to see what he had done. Skills extracted from Lockhart. If you win the duel, randomly choose one of the duelist's abilities. Drawing in. Extraction ends. Reward. Writing skills LV4. The corner of his eye twitched. Shane closed the panel expressionlessly and took a step forward. Soon he found himself standing in front of Lockhart. He used his hand to push Lockhart, who was lying on the remains of the cabinet and doubting his life, towards him. Pulling up, Shane's face immediately showed an expression of admiration. He brushed off the dust on Lockhart's body and started to talk to Lockhart. Professor Lockhart, you really care about us so much. These students can't even take the time to cast spells on us. I didn't realize that you love us so much, and you were so anxious to cast spells on you. I'm so sorry, is that so? Can it be explained this way? Lockhart's puzzled face immediately showed his trademark bright smile, and the familiar white fang appeared again. He nodded sharply and said with great approval. As expected of the second-year student who understands me best, can you guess it comes to my mind? I'm really touched, that's it. No, Professor Lockhart, I made a mistake again, so I must correct it. Let me stand here, and you cast the spell first. I think with your magic ability, you will be able to cast the spell just right, and you can teach magic to everyone. The students present can guarantee my safety. I think that after you have experienced these adventures in the book, it will not be difficult for you to do this, because you can definitely do it. Shane glanced at Blaze and Harry again, and this time they stood firm and defended Lockhart again. At this time, the students were roughly divided into 3 groups. The first group is composed of Lockhart's fans and fans. They still trust and admire Lockhart. There is almost no doubt that Shane's almost inexplicable deliberate boasting is in line with their view of Lockhart. Imagine. The second group completely believes that Lockhart is a fake and a liar, and believes that Shane is deliberately deceiving Lockhart, and is happy to let Lockhart continue to make a fool of himself. The third faction is between the first 2 factions. They are not sure that Lockhart is a liar, but they also do not think that Lockhart is a good person. They want to wait and see, and naturally support Shane and Lockhart to continue fighting among themselves. So when Blaze and Harry led the applause, the vast majority of the students also applauded. Lockhart was in a dilemma, but he felt that what Shane said was sincere and not like he was deceiving himself. After thinking about it, the vanity still in his heart still made Lockhart choose to duel with Shane again. You were right, Mr. Shane Belstead, this is not a problem for me. Let us start the duel again, and let me teach you how to use magic relatively gently to deal with your enemies. Lockhart raised his wand, assuming a posture more like that of an actor performing in a theater, and cast a spell in Shane's direction. In his opinion, it was an elegant wave of the wand. Pesci Pixie, Plestenomi. A beautiful golden light burst from the tip of Lockhart's wand and hit Shane directly. Armored shield. Without any hesitation, Shane waved the wand in his hand in front of him, outlining an arc, and a blue-white halo flashed in front of him, exactly like the ferroelectric spell. The golden light fell on the blue-white halo of the iron armor curse, but it did not cause the slightest ripple. It was as if someone had breathed on the iron armor curse. The golden light was actually very similar to Lojat, and it looked beautiful in appearance. Gold and jade are ruined on the outside, but they have no benefit or effect at all. Shane looked at Lockhart, who seemed to be backing away. Of course he will not give Lockhart a chance to retreat. He must win the duel to gain his opponent's abilities, and to do this, Shane must defeat Lockhart. Somersault in the air. A stream of transparent energy burst out from Shane's wand and hit Lockhart directly, causing Lockhart to fly backwards, flip somersaults in the air, and fall heavily to the ground. The defense against the dark arts class became quiet again, but soon burst into laughter. But the smoked bone curse? This cannot be said to be a surprise. Drawing in. Of course, the damage caused by the bone curse can be cured by using the bone spirit naturally, which is not particularly difficult. Looking at Lockhart, who was retreating rapidly, Shane sighed helplessly. A magician, no matter how much time he wastes, still has more than a dozen magic spells in his body, not to mention a magic ability in his body. You have to extract what you want once or twice, either by European Emperor or by number of times. At present, it seems that Shane can only choose to continue the duel. As soon as Shane hesitated, detailed information about the bone-pulling curse immediately came to mind. Here is blowing. If you win the duel, one of the duelist's abilities is randomly chosen. The bone removal curse was originally a bone regeneration spell, but Lockhart was extremely careless when learning it and made mistakes in his casting techniques, causing it to become a bone removal curse that directly pulls out bones. This healing spell turned into an out-and-out dark magic. As a result, Lockhart, Wang Haojiao, was not stupid. He hurriedly took a step back. Just as he was about to say something, the bell rang suddenly. Lockhart's eyes lit up and he immediately told everyone that get out of class was over without even turning his head. He ran out of the classroom, afraid that Shane would drag him into a duel again. This is not a forgetting spell. Mining ends, obtain. LV1 dice drawing spell. If everyone was surprised before, now everyone can clearly see that Lockhart is really in trouble, except for Hermione and a few other loyal fans of Lockhart. Most others have guessed that Lockhart is really in trouble. Hard as a fake. What is that? A look of admiration appeared on Shane's face again. He walked quickly to Lockhart and stretched out his hand to help him up from the ground. Come sort out Roshante's Oblivion spell. Without disturbing Lockhart, Shane opened the panel again and quickly took out the latest. But in today's example, it may be difficult for Lockett to agree to a duel with Shane in the future, so Shane has to think about how to use skills multiple times to deal with Lockett, and use strong pressure tactics when necessary. The most important thing is to remove the Oblivion curse. Finally give Lockhart a chance. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 154 The Dean's Eager Expectations. It's amazing to give the new defense against the dark arts professor a blowjob on his first day, Shane. Shane sighed helplessly and looked at the unfamiliar Slytherin students. They left immediately after chatting with him. Since the defense against the dark arts class ended that day, people came to them one after another to talk about things or people, and they all left without introducing themselves, which confused Shane. Putting down his knife and fork, Shane turned to Blaze and said, "Brace, I'm going to the Potions Club soon. You go back to the lounge first." Hearing Shane's words, Blaze shook his head and said, "It's a bit early now. I want to go to the library with my girlfriend to study and research with her." Looking at the crazy Zhaofeng, Shane suddenly realized that his girlfriend might not last long this time. This guy is definitely not the kind of person who can sit quietly in the library and study. He can study with his current girlfriend because his girlfriend is still in the sweet period. He is willing to give in and pay. This is just the sweet period for this guy. It's very short, and it is very likely that you will start to slander other students again. Shane and Blaze parted ways. He picked up his things and walked towards the Potions Club in the dungeon. There were originally 5 people in the Potions Club, plus Shane, but one person graduated this year, and that was the president of the Slytherin Female Student Union. Now there are only 4 people left in the Potions Club. When Shane walked into the classroom, there were only 4 desks. "Hey, Shane, you're here. I heard you did a great job in defense against the dark arts this afternoon." Shane raised his hand in greeting and said to him, "Forget about what happened today. I wanted to see what this new professor of protection from black magic is capable of. As I suspected, he turned out to be another bastard. Asshole. Although I have never heard this word, I can understand it to some extent. Maybe this has something to do with my Dragon Kingdom ancestry." Shane smiled, changed the subject and asked, "King, are you going to be in 5th grade this year? Is it time to start reviewing for the Mathematical Olympiad exam? Are you confident?" Hearing this, Teacher Wang showed a helpless look on his face. "I have more or less confidence, but some of my subjects are not excellent, so I may not get full marks. My parents asked me to get full marks, so I can go. It will be convenient to work in the Ministry of Magic, and then take over their classes. You are so good at potions, so you should be able to do the same in other classes, right? I really have no confidence in Transfiguration and Ancient Magic writing. These 2 subjects are too far away from me. I may only get an E. Grade O is 1st class, and grade E is 2nd class, which is equivalent to excellent and good. Maybe for other people, E is already a good grade, but in Mr. Wang's home, only 0 is allowed, and E is not enough. So Mr. Wang is not worried about not passing the exam, but worried about I couldn't pass the 10 inches level exam. It should be said that King is definitely number 1 in the class, as are Cedric, who is in 4th grade this year, and George, who is in 2nd grade this year." Shane and Kim chatted for a while longer, and then the others started arriving. Buckle, is a 4th-year student in Ravenclaw this year. Jennifer Foley, is a 6th-year student in Slytherin this year. These are all current Potions Club students. All 4 of them went to the Potions Club. After a brief conversation, Snape walked into the classroom dragging his black robes. Snape stood on the podium in the Potions Club classroom, looked at Shane and the other 4 people, and said, "This year, my requirements for you are the same as in previous years. I hope that when you complete your 7th grade studies, you can learn a lot about potions. Publish your work in magazines. Of course, I don't require you to publish in the Golden Crucible, but at the next level, like Potionfire or White Smoke, you must publish. White Smoke, but at the next level, like Potionfire or White Smoke, you absolutely must do this, otherwise don't tell anyone you've been to my Potions Club. Of course, there is an exception here." Seeing the dean's eyes, those familiar hollow and cold eyes, the corner of Shane's mouth twitched slightly, and he suddenly felt an ominous premonition. Snape sensed that something was wrong and turned to Shane. "Shane, you are an exception. You must publish at least 2 articles in the Golden Crucible before 7th grade, otherwise you cannot claim to be a member of my Potions Club." 2. You are playing me to death. Feeling the dean's deep expectations and love for him, Shane suddenly had the idea of transferring to Bowbottom. Transferring to Gryffindor was no longer useful. Such a deep preference was worthy of letting Shane go through this step. Road hurdle. Xiao Ming, I got it. Although Shane hesitated to say anything, he was convinced that if he dared to complain or make an excuse, his dean would definitely increase his papers to 3 or 4. Okay, let's start discussing the technical aspects of potion brewing. The event was over. Buck Ike was the first to leave. This guy seemed a bit antisocial and didn't like the excitement and crowds. Jennifer Foley walked from Kim's side to Shane, but she didn't say anything to Shane immediately, waiting quietly for Jin and Shane to finish talking. Jin obviously noticed this. He did not linger, and briefly spoke to Shane, then nodded to Jennifer and left. Shane realized that although Jin appeared to be very decent on the surface, he did not seem to be loved Jennifer. Seeing Jin leave, Jennifer smiled at Chang'en and said, Moen, let's talk. George, let's talk. Senior Jennifer, what do you want to say? It's been a year. Why are you still so unfamiliar with me? Jennifer smiled, and then continued chatting with Shane. Shane, I heard that you joined the reserve team of the Slytherin Brotherhood? There is indeed such a thing. Then you should have told me earlier that Oliver is also a member of this organization. I can ask him to take care of you. Oh no, I was wrong. You two should take care of each other. Shane looked at Jennifer, who suddenly smiled, shook her head slightly and said, Oliver's lobbyist. Since last semester, you have been talking to me about something. If you say it nicely, it is like a non-scholar. If you say it badly, it is pure stupidity. Ravenclaw may have such a very unusual attitude. Scholars have excellent talents, but in Slytherin. So, if you can ask me such a question, you are either a fool or you have an ulterior motive. I just don't know what kind of motive. No, although I don't know Oliver very well, I don't think he will be brainwashed enough to let you be the lobbyist to convince me to side with him. Although he is stupid, he is not stupid enough. So you always knew there was something wrong with me? There are no piglets in a snake's den. After all, you are blood cousins, right? I realized it the first month I joined Potions Club, but what does that have to do with me? Shane opened the classroom door and was about to walk out when Jennifer's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Shane stood up, looked into Jennifer's eyes and said, I'm sorry, I don't want to know. It's too late. I have to go to bed and have classes tomorrow. Jennifer looked at Shane, who immediately left without looking back, with a sad expression. She felt that even if Shane did not agree with her statement, he should inquire in detail. After all, according to Jennifer's understanding, Oliver, who was previously in the reserve organization of the Slytherin Brotherhood, Shane didn't feel sorry for her, and from Jennifer's understanding, Shane was definitely a very vindictive person. Even if he didn't agree to cooperate with her, he would at least sort himself out. She didn't expect that Shane wouldn't pay attention to her at all. He left without looking back. Jennifer looked at Shane. The half-goofy expression on her face disappeared, replaced by a smile, and she said, You're much smarter than I thought. You're much smarter than I thought. 1 second you were like brother and sister, and the next second you were engaging in hand-to-hand combat, and whoever participated was the one. Want to destroy Oliver with me? Jennifer frowned slightly and looked at Shane. Shane ignored her words and was about to leave. For the first time, she felt like she really didn't see through Shane. She thought she had observed Shane more or less in the past year, and this ordeal was also based on her previous observations, but now it seemed that her observations were far from enough. Upon hearing this, Shane's hands froze for a moment, then he walked out of the classroom, closed the door and walked straight towards the lounge. Shane is of course very interested in joining forces to defeat Oliver, but what qualifications does he have to trust Oliver's biological sister? Jennifer leaned on the table, her long blonde hair spread downwards, revealing her beautiful figure. She looked at Shane and asked, Don't you want to know why I did this? Moreover, even if Jennifer really wants to bring down Oliver at this time, who can tell clearly what kind of blood it is, who can understand it, and who can guarantee that if Jennifer does not change her mind afterwards, and if she changes her mind, then if you really make a mistake, you will immediately become passive. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 155 Slugs Pranked. Shane, have you heard? This morning our Quidditch team and the Gryffindor team had a scuffle over the training ground. The Savior's follower Weasley wanted to cast a spell on Malfoy, but he hid himself. Since the morning he has been vomiting snot from his nose until now, and I heard that Weasley looks quite funny. Ron. Slugs. The thing is like this because Ron and Harry flew to Hogwarts in a car at the beginning of school. When they landed, the car hit a willow eater, causing Ron's wand to break and Ron couldn't even cast a complete spell. This time it was also because of the wand that Ron bumped into himself while casting the spell, otherwise Malfoy would have been the one with the runny nose. It's a pity. After chatting for a while, Shane prepared to have lunch. The round of brewing magic potion in the morning really made him suffer a lot. Although he used the mental recovery potion to restore his physical strength, the mental fatigue could not dissipate. He needed a big meal. Come and get some relief. Although the food at Hogwarts is monotonous and diverse, Shane has always been a meat lover. The barbecue at Hogwarts, whether it is beef, mutton, pork or chicken, is quite delicious, and he likes to eat it very much. Just when Shane had worked up an appetite after eating the fried chicken and was about to indulge in a big meal, there were sharp screams and even a few curses coming from outside the auditorium. He subconsciously raised his head and looked towards the door of the auditorium. He saw 2 identical red-haired boys. Each one held one in his hand, grabbed the other from outside the auditorium, and ran quickly towards Slytherin's long table. Go. Although Shane is also a member of Slytherin, in Ron's mind, Shane is an exception to Slytherin and a very trustworthy friend, regardless of previous friendships. At about 3 or 4 o'clock, many students in 3rd grade and above went to Hogsmeade. It wasn't until the sun set that Shane raised his head, returned to his room, put down his books, changed his clothes, and picked up the things he had prepared. Tonic, cast the disillusionment curse, passed through the dilapidated Willow Tunnel, and left Hogwarts. After lunch, Shane returned to the lounge, gave Andy a magic potion, then returned to his room, summoned a house elf to make him some black tea, ate something, rested for a while, and held a cup of this book, went to the library and continued to read the books recommended by the 2 clubs. Of course Shane could see the apology on Ron's face, but to be honest, Ron pounced on him when his appetite was whetted, which really whetted Shane's appetite. At the same time, Shane looked at the twins who were trying to run. He picked them up with one hand and threw them straight into the air. Watching them scream and fall from the sky, Shane pulled out his wand and waved it on the twins. At that moment, the colorful ribbons hanging from the ceiling immediately deformed, tying the Weasley twins together layer by layer like snakes, making them unable to move for half a minute, like 2 salted fish hanging from the ceiling. They hung from the ceiling like 2 salted fish. At this moment, Shane had a premonition in his heart. Seeing this scene, Ron's face immediately showed an apologetic expression. He wanted to apologize and explain to Shane, but before he could open his mouth, one of the twins patted Ron on the back again, making him want to explain. Ron forcibly spilled the Slytherin on the table, unable to say a word. Of course, this was Shane's deliberate move. If he had focused more on his tactics, Gryffindor wouldn't have stood idly by. Ron turned his head and looked at his brothers. Although it had been decided that he would just go along with them to discuss Malfoy and the Slytherin boys, Ron would never go out of his way to deliberately disgust and attack Shane. 0. Please give me flowers. Ron still remembers the great help Shane gave him when he stopped Quirrell last year. Shane put the knife and fork on the table with the back of his hand, supported the table with one hand, crossed the Slytherin table with his body, drew an arc in front of Ron and the Weasley twins, grabbed Ron, and pulled him away from the Weasley twins. The Sly twins pulled it out from their hands, and then used a little force to make Ron slide on the ground for a short distance, and finally landed right next to the Hufflepuff table. They opened their mouths and spit out snot, forcing Hufflepuff to the people near the long table changed from bystanders and gourmet eaters to victims. Several Hufflepuff girls next to them had already opened their mouths and spit out the food they had just eaten. The Weasley twins didn't wait for Shane to react, and they pulled their brother Ron and rushed to the Slytherin table. When they ran in front of Shane and Malfoy, they couldn't tell whether it was Fred or Shane. One of the twins. One was helping Ron, and the other was patting Ron on the back hard, causing Ron to start spitting out slugs faster, and the greasy and disgusting slugs flew out of Ron's mouth. Come out. Spit it out and drop it on the floor, or even on the long table. Because Harry and Ron drove into Dolly last time, leaving a huge bandage on Dolly's body. Dolly's movement was greatly hindered. Shane easily stepped into the passage and arrived at the squeaky cabin. Looked at the marks he made on the doors and windows of the GG hut, and found that they were all clean. He breathed a sigh of relief, then carefully opened the door of the GG hut and walked towards Hog silently. If these slugs just looked disgusting, it wouldn't be a problem, but the problem was that they gave off an earthy smell. One of them was deliberately made by the twins. It arched its body and landed right next to Shane's plate. The sticky mucus spread on the beef on Shane's plate, and the earthy smell penetrated his nose. Afterwards, amid the applause and cheers of the surrounding Slytherins and even some Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs, Shane waved his wand again and swept away these disgusting-looking slugs, but unfortunately, even all the slugs were gone, and Shane had no appetite. He, Bryce, and Jason immediately left the hall together. At this time, although the Gryffindors were furious with Shane, they fully understood what had just happened. It was the Weasley twins who ruined everything on their own initiative. Moreover, they were extremely disgusted with the Weasley twins and Ron. They also fell victim to the Weasley twins' daily pranks more than once, so instead of giving the Weasley twins a blow, they were glad that the Weasley twins were unlucky. As a result, today, his 2 twin brothers seemed to be targeting Shane specifically, making him spit out several mouthfuls of snot in front of Shane, almost as much as Malfoy was vomiting. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 156. The next day Jason immediately fell into a deep sleep, but was awakened by a sound from across the room. After school started, Jason decided to change rooms with someone else and move in with Shane. The loud noise he just heard came from Shane's room. Without thinking, Jason jumped out of bed. He was wearing pajamas, so he didn't have to worry about taking off his clothes. Holding a wand, he knocked on the door before entering Shane's room. Shane, are you okay? Not long after knocking on the door, Jason heard footsteps gradually echoing inside. After a while, the door to Shane's room opened from the inside. Jason glanced at Shane, who was standing in the doorway, looking a little messy, and turned to look inside. It was found that one of Shane's wardrobes had been overturned on the ground, and the contents of the cupboards and sideboards were scattered on the floor. Shane seemed to be fine, but her clothes were a little messy, and her 647 clothes were even a little bit messy. The place is broken. Shane, what's wrong with you? Shane shook his head, with a trace of uncontrollable joy on his face. I'm fine, I just accidentally bumped into the cabinet when I was checking things, disturbing your peace. I don't mind, but are you really okay? I'm fine, don't worry. You know my physical condition, no problem. After confirming that Shane was okay, Jason nodded and said, okay, someone will be here soon, rest early, I'm going back. Okay, go to sleep, good night. It was about to close the door, and Shane suddenly remembered something and said to Jason, by the way, Jason, you don't have to follow me all the time in Hogwarts from now on. There won't be any danger in Hogwarts, and besides, our courses are different. In addition to the required courses, you also have elective courses, so don't spend your time with me, it's meaningless. After hearing this, Jason hesitated and said, but my responsibility is. Besides, there is no responsibility to speak of. You can't defeat me alone, can you? Shane's words directly stung Jason's vital glands. Looking at Shane helplessly, Jason said, okay, then I'll take care of myself first. If you need anything, contact me immediately and I'll be right over. Okay, what happened at Hogwarts? Jason looked at Shane. In his opinion, Shane's tone when he said this was quite subtle and seemed to have a sarcastic meaning in it. However, after listening carefully, it seemed that was not the case, but Jason did not pay much attention to it. Shane is sometimes like this on weekdays. The pious and subtle tone in his tone is something Jason has long been accustomed to and doesn't pay much attention to. Looking at Jason, who turned back to his room to sleep, Shane closed the door of the room. The smile on his face could no longer be suppressed. He didn't expect that the guess he just made could really come true. Using this magic combined with his flying talent could really work. Such an astonishing speed burst out in an instant, and it was still the same even if it was slightly elevated. If it had not been elevated, Shane felt that he could punch through the wall directly. An unexpected surprise, this is an unexpected treat. He waved his wand and restored all the cabinets and scattered items to their original state, then repaired the broken items as if they were broken. Shane picked up Kukin, who was lying on the bed, as quickly as possible, gently stroked its head to comfort him for a while, and then climbed into bed to get ready for bed. However, what he just discovered really surprised Shane and made him lie in bed for a long time. Then finally fell asleep. After class, Shane looked at the heartbroken Harry and just said thank you expressionlessly. Today's classes only had one potions class in the morning and one spell class in the afternoon, so after the potions class, Shane and Bryce went to the library together. Unfortunately, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff's potions classes were on the third day. In the second period, Bryce couldn't study with his girlfriend but could only study with Dawn. Shane nodded, looked at Blaze and said, yes, didn't I tell you before? Have you forgotten? Shane shook his head, looked at Blaze with a smile, and patted his head. Nuts, don't think everyone else is like you, I don't think she noticed me. Since Shane gained the two talents of Troll Power and Troll Rattle, his appetite has increased by 1.8 per day, reaching an astonishing level before his eyes, comparable to those pot-bellied kings on the internet in his previous life. Compared with those pot-bellied kings, Shane is the correct version without hyperactivity in the real pot-bellied one. Early the next morning, Shane was awakened by Bryce's angry knock on the door. But just when Shane and Bryce sat down at the table, Harry and Ron ran into the classroom in a panic. Seeing this, Snape immediately walked over to Harry and scolded him for 3 minutes. The general idea is that as a savior, he is guilty of not observing time and being late for class. Unlike the first grade, the second grade no longer has flying lessons, and there are still no elective courses for the third grade and above, making the second grade the easiest school year in the entire 7 years of Hogwarts. After lunch, the spell class started, but as always it was Slytherin and Ravenclaw together. Like last year, Shane had no chance to score points at all. Although Professor Freeway did not have double standards like Snape, he had more or less. Freeway will also give his own college some consideration, such as question time. Even if Shane raises his hand first, as long as others raise their hands at a similar speed, Freeway will choose his own college to answer the question. Shane, are you going to the Calderwood Club later? Point. The meal in the evening is the most sumptuous of the 3 meals. Tonight is fried chicken and fried lamb chops. Shane ate 2 pieces of fried chicken with mashed potatoes and a fried lamb chop, then wiped his mouth with satisfaction and drank a glass of pumpkin juice. At the end of potions class, Shane made the perfect potion and Slytherin got 10 points. Harry and Ron gave Gryffindor 10 points for being late for the first lesson of the semester. When they hurried into the first classroom, potions class was about to start. Snape was already standing on the podium, looking at Shane and Blaze, motioning for them to sit down and get ready for class. This guy named Bryce has a habit of getting up at critical moments, and he can make Bryce wait for him. Shane can tell at a glance that this man is afraid of being late. If he is not late, he will definitely not have time to have breakfast. There is no doubt that this time it was Celine Bishop who took away Shane's extra point opportunity. She was the third in Ravenclaw in her year. That's not the case. I just want you to know that Celine from Ravenclaw is also at the Coldwood Club. You can get very close to others when you go there. I think she pays close attention to you. As the sun set, Shane, Bryce and Jason sat in the lobby to enjoy dinner. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 157 Coldwood Club on the first floor, in the corridor to the left of the stairs, the third painting. This is the message on the note written by Professor McGonagall to Shane, which indicates the location of the Coldwood Club today. Shane walked to the painting of the old man sitting in the study, looked at Shane standing in front of the painting, and walked past his desk. I always feel that there are too few green plants in my office. Can you help me decorate my office and add some green plants? Just use the apple on my desk and change it into a deformed apple. Do you think it will work? Hearing this, Shane realized that this was a test for joining the Coldwood Club, but he didn't know whether he had to accept the test every time or just the first time. Shane took out his wand and carefully pointed it at the apple in the painting. The apple immediately sprouted many tentacle-like branches. He lifted the apple from the table and then lifted it from the table to the corner next to the desk in the painting. The apple quickly had turned into a huge flower pot, and the branches growing from the apple turned into a small tree. Just when the old man thought that Transformation 07 was over, the vines grew again in the flower pot. Just when the old man thought the transformation was over, vines sprouted out of the flower pot again, sprouting along the walls and the bookshelf behind them, and soon covered the entire bookshelf and walls. Even the ceiling was covered with vines, and the study became a room full of greenery. Seeing the modified office, the old man had a look of surprise on his face. He nodded meaningfully and said to Shane, "Excellent transfiguration. No wonder Minerva invited you to join Caldor when school first started. The Calderwood Club. As the Transfiguration professor at Hogwarts a century ago, I welcome you to the Calderwood Club." When the old man's handwriting on the painting disappeared, the painting quickly turned into a door and opened by itself. Shane passed through the door through which the painting was turned, and along the candlelit corridor, he found himself in a circular room with a candle hanging from the top, emitting a bright light. At this time, in the classroom of the Calderwood Club, Professor McGonagall was already sitting on the sofa in the middle. The style of Professor McGonagall's Witchcraft Club is completely different from Snape's Potions Club. In Snape's Potions Club, candles and burning fireplaces can be seen everywhere, and the environment at the beginning of the club is also quite comfortable. There is only one cushioned sofa in the circular classroom, and the sofas where the students sit are arranged around the sofa in the middle where Professor McGonagall sits. There are 9 sofas in total, arranged in the correct order. "Shane, you're early, please find a place to sit down." Looking around at the sofas, Shane asked Professor McGonagall, "Professor, are the sofas here fixed?" "This is a casual place without too many rules. It's more of a shared experience than a class, so you don't need to be too nervous, just relax." "In that case, I understand, thank you, Professor." Professor McGonagall smiled and nodded to Shane, then turned her attention to the hand in her hand. Shane saw Professor McGonagall reading a book, so he took it out and started reading. During his 1 month at Bowbottom, he had developed the habit of never leaving his hand with a book. At that time, this book was mostly in Aldrich's hand, or in his pocket where he cast the weightless stretch spell, but now that Aldrich was not with him, he was not worried about accidentally using the weightless stretch spell in public. Items enchanted with a weightless stretching charm. The Ministry of Magic prohibits the use of items with a weightless stretching charm. The Ministry of Magic prohibits the casual use of items with odorless stretching charms, so Shane just held the book in his hand. During the reading process, people also came one after another. The empty sofa was slowly filled with people, and just as the Coldwood Club was about to begin, Ghislaine Bishop, a Ravenclaw student in the same grade as Chong Kong, came in last. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to see you again. 3 members of your school graduated last year and 2 were joining this year. Let's welcome Mr. Shane Belstead and Miss Ghislaine Bishop." There were 9 students in total. Except for the 2 freshmen Shane and Guy Serling, the other 7 immediately applauded after hearing Professor McGonagall's words. At this time, Shane looked at the others, nodded in greeting one by one, and then looked around and found that Professor McGonagall's Coldwood Club was crowded with representatives from 4 colleges. In addition to the 2 newcomers Shane and Guy Serling, there were 3 others. A Gryffindor, a Ravenclaw, a Hufflepuff and 2 Slytherins. The Slytherin student was a 5th-year student. Shane didn't know him. He just smiled and nodded, but didn't speak immediately because Professor McGonagall had already started communicating. Today we will continue the progress of last year and begin to explore the research on transformation technique to change the target size. This involves the research on dead objects becoming larger and smaller, and the research on living objects becoming larger and smaller, among which the living objects become larger and smaller. It is a very complicated transformation, and it can also be replaced by magic spells. But if you want to understand the mystery of transformation technique up close, you must pass this level. After listening to Professor McGonagall's words, everyone present 65 nodded. Magic develops with the times. Some powerful and exquisite magic disappears with history, and there are also talented magicians who lead magic into a new realm. In general, the development of magic is still advancing. Although magic today is the secret assassination aspect is weaker than before, but it still surpasses the past in terms of subtlety and depth. Human beings have been making progress, and so have magicians. In modern magic, if you want to make something larger or smaller, using the increase or decrease spell in magic is the most convenient, simplest method, and the most versatile method, but transfiguration can also make a thing larger or smaller. Smaller, But the increase and decrease in transfiguration seems to have the same result as the increase and decrease in magic, but the principle is completely different, and the increase and decrease in transfiguration is much more difficult. Many people will not explore the third step of becoming gods for the sake of this effect of becoming more and less, but for those in the club who have obvious talents in becoming gods and hope to break through to a higher level of becoming gods, exploring or even it is naturally necessary to break through to the third step of becoming a god. Shane sat on the sofa, listening intently to the quarrel between the others and Professor McGonagall. His fingertips automatically scratched the quills in his notebook, recording the conversations in the club, trying not to miss any important content. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 158. The unpleasant first week is over. The Witching Club doesn't take long because unlike the Potions Club, here you have to make potions, which is time-consuming, so the party ends in about an hour and a half. After walking out of the door that turned into a picture frame, Shane was about to go downstairs to the Slytherin common room to rest, when a fifth-year Slytherin student walked over quickly and said to Shane, "Shane, let's meet." Stopping in the corridor, Shane looked across. As a fifth-grade student, the man opposite was only about 1.6 meters tall. He was short and thin, but his appearance was quite capable, with narrow eyes and sharp edges. The face feels quite like a knife, quite sharp. "Do you know my name? There are not many people in Slytherin who don't know you, not to mention that you defeated Malfoy in the sorting ceremony at the beginning of last year, which is enough for all Slytherin students to know you." He changed the topic and said, "Meet Aiden, my name is Aiden, Aiden Fox." Shane Belstead, "Nice to meet you." They shook hands and walked down the stairs in unison, chatting on the way to the common room. "Aiden, when did you join Calderwood Club?" "I have entered my 4th year and have been working at the club for 1 year." "So you are going to start reviewing for the exam this year, right?" After hearing what Shane said, Aiden immediately realized that the test Shane was talking about was the mathematical Olympiad. He smiled bitterly, and Aiden said helplessly, "Actually, I am only interested in transfiguration and my grades are pretty good, but other subjects are not so good. I just hope I can get an E by then." Shane nodded. In fact, there are many students like Aiden at Hogwarts. They have great talents and interests in one or more subjects, but have mediocre results in other subjects. In fact, every student at Hogwarts has a lot of talents and interests. In a grade, few people can achieve good results in all subjects like Shane and Hermione. Speaking of Hermione, Shane thought he could see her at the Calderwood Club, but it seems that due to Professor McGonagall, Hermione has not had the chance to enter the Calderwood Club. Maybe we can see her next year or the year after. But to be honest, during class on weekdays, Shane had discovered Hermione's talent in spells and potions. He suspected that Hermione might have joined Professor Flitwick's spell club. As for potions, if it weren't for his dean, if she didn't like Gryffindor, Hermione would probably join the potions club. But Hermione's transfiguration is indeed very good, but it is not enough to enter the Calderwood Club. Just like Shane's talent in spells, he also has it, but it is not enough to get an invitation from Professor Flitwick. Maybe 2 years later that'll be it. Back in the Slytherin common room, Shane and Aiden each returned to their rooms. Shane went to talk to Brace and then went back to his room to rest. The first week of classes was not much different from last year. Saturday came in a blink of an eye. The Potions Club and the Fur Club each came for the second time. Needless to say, the Potions Club was loved by the dean, as always. It is necessary to hold Shane's hand and read the magic potion book 6 times more. At the same time, Professor McGonagall also introduced several books to Shane. Although he read them voluntarily, he had to do it without looking. It is impossible to follow without looking. The progress of joining the club will be cleared if it cannot keep up with the progress of the club. After all, we still need to seriously consider the issue of chewing books. Shane left the room with the coffee. He made an appointment to meet Andy today to discuss their cooperation. As soon as he arrived in the lounge, Shane caught a glimpse of several members of the Slytherin team putting on their Quidditch uniforms and leaving the Slytherin lounge. He couldn't help but nodded, realizing that this year's Quidditch preparations were on the first day of the game. The week has already started. After finding a place to sit down, Andy hurried over and sat down opposite Shane. The two have known each other for a year, so they were not polite. Andy immediately took out a list, stretched it out in front of Shane, and said, "Shane, look at these magic potions, can you make them over the weekend?" Shane looked at the contents inside, frowned slightly and said, "This is too much, and the brewing process of these 2 magic potions is very cumbersome. I don't have much time to prepare." Looking at the magic potion pointed by Shane, Andy hesitated for a moment, took the initiative to mark out one of them, and then asked, "This is the magic potion with the largest dosage. The brewing level is not very high, I am going to give it to others. My classmates are brewing, so can you brew these 2 magic potions?" Shane thought for a while. Today is Saturday, and he plans to sneak out to deal with some things tonight while the 3rd-year students and above go to Hogsmeade. Those potions might take all morning, and after lunch he could read a book, hardly turning back time. After thinking about it, Shane nodded and said, "Okay, that's it." Seeing Shane agree, Andy's face showed a smile, and he thanked Shane. "Thank you very much, Shane, you helped me a lot. You seem to be in a hurry to go somewhere this year, what's the matter?" Andy was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter, this is just a common occurrence. You have done me a big favor by helping me brew these magic potions. I will take care of the rest. If it's really important, you can come to me. I'll put other things aside for the time being. I'll do it if you don't mind your own business. At this point, Shane felt it was inconvenient to continue the conversation. Okay. He nodded to Andy, and the two parted ways. Shane returned to his room, tidied up, took the materials and a few books that Andy had just given him, left the lounge, went to the room of requirement alone, and walked into the room where he had been preparing potions for the past 10 years, room. Blaze didn't go to the library this semester. He went to the library with his Ravenclaw girlfriend on Saturdays and Sundays. He studied so well that it was almost like him. Shane didn't have any problem with this, even though Blaze had already started going to the library. Now, he is really studying so that he won't be rushed at the end of the semester. At 12:40, Shane left the arrivals hall. He sighed tiredly, stood at the door of the arrivals hall and drank a bottle of restorative potion, then turned and walked towards the auditorium. The moment Shane walked into the auditorium, he glanced at he saw Bryce walking towards him with a gloating look on his face, walking very fast. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 159 Farewell to Marlowe 3 Broomsticks Bar. The young man walked in with an unhappy look on his face, looked around, and sat down at a table in the 3 Broomsticks Bar. A young man was already sitting there, but he looked a little fat, with a smile on his face, and he looked very likable. At this time, a slightly plump young man looked at the unlucky young man sitting opposite him and said, "Do you want to buy snake eggs and bird eggs? I prefer Troll's Dance." Upon hearing this, the plump young man immediately lowered his head and respectfully called in a low voice, "I finally see you, master." The werewolf youth, that is, Shane, who had taken the compound tonic, looked at Marlowe, who had also taken the compound tonic. Shane said to him, "How did you do what I asked you to do? I have formed a team of 11 people, but they have never seen your greatness, master, so." Having reached this point, Marlowe did not continue. Obviously, although the people he summoned had already sided with Marlowe because of Voldemort's reputation, Voldemort had not yet appeared and had not shown that he could overwhelming their corresponding strength. These guys obviously don't obey Marlowe's orders very much. Dark wizards are wild and unruly. How can they unite? After all, they just want to gain more benefits or power. When Voldemort was under the command of the Death Eaters, the Dark Wizards were unscrupulous, but there are still many Dark Wizards who miss that era very much. These Dark Wizards who rallied around Marlowe were of this type. Sooner or later these people will appreciate my greatness, there is no need to rush. You are right, great master, Shane nodded. He himself didn't expect Marlowe to form a team for him, so naturally he couldn't say he was disappointed. The reason why Shane gave Marlowe this task was just to stabilize his mood and do something for himself at the same time. Something Gwarts couldn't do. Looking at Marlowe, Shane ordered, "Marlowe, I need you to prepare something for me. The specific content is on this parchment. Remember, don't attract anyone's attention. I will wait here next week. I need you to go bring it to me." After saying these words, Shane handed Marlowe the parchment with what he wanted written on it. Then Shane glanced at Marlowe, stood up and walked out of the 3 Broomsticks Tavern and straight out of Hogsmeade. But Shane, the destination was not the Shrieking Shack, but the mountain on the other side of Hogsmeade. Standing in an open space halfway up the mountain, because of the huge rocks on the ground, not a single tree grew here. Shane turned his head and looked in the direction he was looking, and said coldly, "Come out, your illusion spell is really true, it sucks." Like water ripples, a middle-aged wizard appeared not far from Shane. Shane looked at the other person. His hair was greasy hanging down on both sides, he was wearing a monocle, his clothes were slightly dirty, even tattered, and he looked like a tramp. This kind of person is most common in modern dark wizards who do not perform on stage. "I saw Marlowe bought some complicated tonics and wondered if he had any conspiracy. I didn't expect him to come to you. I just don't know who you are. Are you also a servant of the Dark Lord? Or maybe you and Maluodu is a liar who pretends to be the Dark Lord to deceive us?" Marlowe, who was waiting by the forest, saw Shane and the Black Magician chasing Shane. He was not surprised at all, because in his mind, the Master was omnipotent, and this was just a small black magic. Master. The Master only needs to raise his hand to subdue him. At this moment, Voldemort, who was formed by black smoke, suddenly raised his hand, and Shane's wand appeared in her hand and directly released a dispel spell on the Dark Wizard. As for the limb-twisting spell, this is a common black magic. When a limb is hit, it will immediately twist and spin in a circle, causing damage and painful screams. Generally speaking, this is how it works, but Jen N sensitively noticed another use of this dark magic. It seemed to have the same effect on the 5th limb. Oh, no, the problem is the limb-twisting spell. He walked up to the black mage, raised his wand again without thinking, and cast the Imperious Curse on him. Seeing the clues on the panel, Shane immediately realized that this guy's strength might not be as strong as some of the senior students at Hogwarts, and might only reach the level of 4th and 5th grade students at Hogwarts. Such strength was it is possible that it is not owned by Hogwarts graduates, but more likely by wizards who grew up in families or apprentices. Drawing in. Extraction completed, obtained, LV1 distortion spell. What the hell is this? Watching the dark wizard take out his wand and wave it continuously to release magic to knock down those hands, Shane also did the same. Black smoke gathered on the surface of his body, forming the shape of Voldemort, and the wide black robe made of black smoke floating slowly. It feels like the devil is coming. A red light flew over, and the dark wizard who kept waving his wand to defeat the hand of black smoke had no time to counter Shane's disarming spell, and was knocked to the ground by the red light of the disarming spell. His body flew straight back and was mercilessly hit behind him. On a big tree, the wand turned over, drew an arc, and landed in Shane's hand. Seeing Shane's change at this time, a trace of fear appeared on the black mage's face. He opened his mouth to say something, but it was too late. A dark green light flashed past, and Shane threw the wand directly into the dark wizard's hand, letting him stand up with the wand. The soul is outside the body. After thinking about it, Shane stopped thinking about how to reverse the chicken. When the black mage on the opposite side, AHFE, finished speaking, Shane's black smoke had already covered the surrounding ground. He had nothing to say. With a move of faith, the black smoke immediately rose from the ground and turned into a bird made of black smoke. Hand, grab the black mage. If you win the duel, one of the duelist's abilities is randomly chosen. Countless hands of black smoke reached out to the black mage, and he continued to wave his wand, trying to resist. Shane looked at his interlocutor. In his opinion, the power of the black mage opposite was not too great, but a black mage like them probably possessed some kind of black magic with unknown effects. In order to accidentally overturn the car, Shane secretly released black smoke after seeing the interlocutor. The black smoke spread along Shane's feet on the rugged ground, slightly surrounding the interlocutor. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 160 getting ready to go on stage. Putting down his wand, Shane decided to sneak out of Hogwarts this time. After strengthening Marlowe with the Imperious Curse, Shane was able to maintain the Imperious Curse for a long time because Marlowe surrendered and fully opened his mind and brain. In fact, even without the soul-stealing curse, Marlowe would obey Shane's words, but in order to avoid accidents, the soul-stealing curse must continue to be blocked so that Shane could remain calm and composed. Marlowe, if you have nothing else to do, take him away. I have given him orders to do whatever you want. Remember to cast the Imperious Curse on him regularly. If you have the chance, you can also cast the Imperious Curse on those wizards who don't listen to you, to make sure they do what you say. Because looking at Marlowe, who was showing great respect, Shane's body sprayed out black smoke again, and his body rose into the air. Encircled and shrouded by the black smoke, he quickly flew into the air and disappeared from Marlowe's sight. Marlowe took one last look at Shane, who disappeared into the night, and the awe in his heart became stronger and stronger. Body flying is the signature ability of the Dark Lord. In Marlowe's eyes, body flying represents superiority. Only the Dark Lord can possess such an ability. Marlowe stood up and looked at the black-robed mage with a mocking look in his eyes. Chasing the Dark Lord and not being killed for it was already the result of the Dark Lord's mercy. If the Dark Lord hadn't used a human, such a guy is already a corpse. Follow me, tell me you didn't find anything when you get back, and at the same time, write down those people who have the biggest objections to me and the Dark Lord, and tell me quietly, do you understand? I see. As soon as he finished speaking, Marlowe stretched out his hand and forced the black mage to use apparition, and disappeared on the spot. You must know that this black mage can't apparate at all. Even within the black mage, he is considered to be the absolute bottom, and Marlowe has been secretly doing so recently. Most of the guys we recruit are like this. Shane limped out of the shattered willow tree. He felt that he shouldn't have been showing off just now. He flew very well, but when he landed, Shane failed to maintain his balance and fell straight to the ground. And because of the troll's talent of skin thorns, Shane is rough-skinned and fleshy, but his ankles are slightly bent. If his body had the strength of a normal person, he would probably break his right leg. Gee, just being able to fly is not enough, you have to spend time practicing. Otherwise, the ability to fly up and down will not be wasted. Don't wait until you fight someone to be knocked down in midair. This will cause you to fall half to death when you don't need to continue fighting. Laughing at the enemy is also considered a sneak attack. Under the cover of illusion, Shane walked deeper and deeper towards Hogwarts Castle. Shane stood between Hagrid's hut and the greenhouse. He could see the pumpkins that Hagrid planted outside the hut from a distance. The moment Shane turned his head, he suddenly saw a small figure coming from Hagrid. He ran out of the hut, ran through the pumpkin patch, and ran back to the direction of Hogwarts Castle. Due to the effect of the ghost spell, even if the person he was talking to passed by Shane, he didn't notice anything. Of course, maybe the person he was speaking to was too excited to notice. Shane couldn't remember whether he had to carry the diary with him when Host was controlled, so when he recognized Ginny, he didn't do anything to avoid scaring her away, but in Shane's opinion, Ginny, when summoning the basilisk, will most likely have to carry a journal with her. Shane can use the soul-stealing curse to control dark wizards, Death Eaters, and even some of Shane's own enemies without the slightest psychological burden, but using the soul-stealing curse to control an innocent Gryffindor girl, Shane has no choice but to do so. Be prepared, he hasn't reached that level of unscrupulousness yet. In addition, whether or not the Imperious Curse has been cast, the person who has been cursed can more or less feel it. Unless Shane kills someone afterwards, there is a high chance that he will be discovered. Shane pulled Culkin down, put his arms around his waist, threw him over his shoulders, and then picked up the book to continue reading. Shane looked at the feathers in his hands. If these weren't chicken feathers, Shane would recognize them as none other than Ron and his twin sister Ginny Weasley. Is the diary now under control? Returning to Hogwarts, under Dumbledore's eyes, he used the soul-stealing spell to control a student to steal things for him. How bad does Shane have to be to do something like this? Voldemort might not have dared to do it back then. He can't get off. In fact, Shane had already considered using the Imperious Curse to control a Gryffindor girl to help him steal the diary, but Shane rejected the idea as soon as he thought of it. Shane took out the magic potion and poured it on the injured ankle, rubbed it gently, and immediately felt a chill coming from the ankle. When he realized the potion was working, he pulled down his trousers and put on his boots. Shane thought about the time when the basilisk appeared. He vaguely remembered that the first time Harry saw the text left by the Slytherin heir was when he went to attend an event such as a haunted party or a birthday party. In this case, Shane would just have to remember to go to the Moaning Myrtle Girl's refreshment room early that day. Chicken feather. Thinking about it, he returned to the lounge in his room. After all, the snake-like monster only obeys the orders of the heir of Slytherin. Even if Ginny is controlled by the diary, she can only speak a few snake words and will not be the heir of Slytherin, so it is likely that the soul fragment of Voldemort in the diary will be used. Take control, and that's the perfect opportunity for Shane to get the diary. I just don't know if the diary will be on it now. 0. Please give me flowers. Although Shane cannot remember many plot details in the original work, at least he remembers that Ginny was the owner of the diary and opened the secret room under the control of the diary, releasing the basilisk. But at this moment, Culkin, who was lying quietly and comfortably on Shane's shoulder, suddenly raised his head, and his originally comfortable and soft eyes became sharp and fierce. He turned his head and looked somewhere outside the room, and kept saying he made a hissing sound, as if he was restraining something, and also seemed to be wary of something. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 161 Fleeting. Culkin, what's wrong with you? Shane noticed Culkin's abnormality at the first time. He hurriedly reached out to touch Culkin's head and body, trying to calm him down, but Culkin seemed to be stimulated and still stared at one side tightly. Mouth there was a constant hissing sound. Shane thought while comforting Culkin, and finally realized that Culkin's abnormality was probably related to the basilisk. Shane vaguely remembered that the basilisk should have been released by now, but it only launched its first attack on Halloween. It took Culkin more than 10 minutes to recover from the abnormal state. Shane stretched out his hand to caress the Culkin. Slowly, the Culkin lay on Shane's body again. It wrapped around Shane's body and tightened slightly, as if to guard against Shane, and because of 517. Shane's body the quality is comparable to that of half a troll, and it will not feel pain. Otherwise, if it were an ordinary person, it would probably be injured. After getting Culkin to calm down, Shane put him on his bed and let him sleep on his bed. Shane, on the other hand, sat at his desk and continued reading, thinking about Culkin. Just now, he saw Sangyang Gyatso's performance. This was not what an ordinary snake could show. Ordinary snakes either couldn't feel the existence of the basilisk at all, or showed surrender when facing the basilisk. The snake felt the presence of the basilisk from a distance across many walls and showed confrontation and intimidation. This was no longer an ordinary snake. No matter what, my relationship with Culkin will not change and we will deal with any changes when the time comes. Thinking of this, Shane exhaled and continued reading the books on the list given to him by the dean. The next September passed quietly at Hogwarts, as students prepared to adapt to campus life after the holidays and immersed themselves in endless learning. At least for Shane, it has truly been a never-ending learning experience. Compared to last semester with one less flight class, many people are having an easier time than last year, but Shane is not among them. This semester he joined the Calderwood Club. Although the requirements of the Calderwood Club are not high, and Professor McGonagall does not strictly stipulate what to read and what homework to keep, the Calderwood Club has assessments every month. If without achievements or progress that would make Professor McGonagall nod, he would probably be persuaded to quit. Therefore, Calderwood Club looks simpler than Potions Club, but in fact it does not take much less time than Potions Club. This is a really good variation, Shane. Professor McGonagall looked at the cabinet that Shane had modified with beetles and nodded with satisfaction. Compared with when he first started school, Shane can already use transformation to make targets larger relatively stably. Although the size change is not very large, it is a very good start. You must know that among the students at Hogwarts, there are currently only 9 people who can join the Calwood Club, and those more ordinary students are very backward in transfiguration. They can steadily learn transfiguration to level 2. It is already quite good. Those who can learn the transformation technique to the 3rd level can be said to be the best, second only to those students in the club. After seeing real transfiguration, Shane realized how powerful Harry's father, Sirius, and other people who could pass the Animagus transfiguration in school were, even though he almost punctured his own spine during the first transfiguration. The little dwarf Peter, the sleepy shapeshifter, is not bad either. Speaking of Peter Pettigrew, this guy has been hanging around Shane and is one of the problems that Shane has to solve. But there are some problems this year, not only the basilisk, but also the diary and Lockhart, so Shane brought Peter Pettigrew was placed next year. It happened that Peter Pettigrew of next year took the initiative to escape from the Gryffindor common room after learning that Sirius had escaped from Azkaban. This would be the best way to deal with him. Method. Leaving the Coldwood Club classroom, Shane and Aiden headed to the Slytherin common room together. Just when Shane and Aiden came to the first floor, they happened to see Roshaw. He said he was patrolling the first floor, but in fact he was walking around the performance site. At this time, Roshaw also saw Shane and Aiden, but before Shane and Aiden could get closer, Roshaw immediately turned a corner and quickly disappeared in front of Shane. Seeing this scene, Aiden smiled and shook his head. "Shane, Lockhart is afraid of you." In the past 9 months, Shane has always found a way to challenge Lockhart in the defense against the dark arts class. Lockhart might have stumbled a bit after the first class, but Shane succeeded twice. In the next defense against the dark arts class, Shane dueled twice more, with Shane losing miserably. At this time, Lockhart finally understood that Shane had actually seen through his true nature. And the things he said before were all lies, and he was deliberately making himself look awkward. From then on, Lockhart began to avoid Shane. Although Lockhart always gave Shane the highest marks in order to prevent him from getting into trouble, he ignored Shane's words in class and turned around immediately when he saw Shane walk. Faced with someone like Lockhart, Shane was helpless. Couldn't he just walk up to the door with his wand and duel Lockhart? This is not a duel, but a butt attack. Looking at Lockhart turning away, Shane realized that if he wanted to break Lockhart's forgetfulness spell, he would need some extreme means. Just in time, Lockhart will enter the secret room with Harry and the others, and then Shane can do some small tricks to break the forgetting curse. Unfortunately, Shane's panel is not a game. A person's understanding of magic is fixed. Even if you take the same magic from him 10 times or 100 times, it will not improve the effect of the magic unless the person himself understands magic. Understanding has improved. Otherwise, Shane just needs to find someone who can forget the spell and cast it on him in turn to maximize the magic. Back in the lounge, Shane was about to go back to his room when he suddenly saw Blaze waiting at the door of his room. Seeing the solemn expression on Blaze's face, he quickly stepped forward and asked, "Brace, what's wrong with you?" "I'm fine, but this guy Andy seems to be in trouble." Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 162. Andy's trouble. Shane stood in front of the door of Andy's room. Looking at Andy standing at the door, his expression was stern and dull. Andy, who is usually seen as very concerned about his appearance, now looked slovenly, and as Blaze said, he is really worried about something. "Shane, Bryce, you are here." Shane glanced at Andy, and without waiting for Andy's invitation, he led Brace in and closed the door. Shane sat down directly in front of Andy's desk, looked at Andy and asked, "Andy, is there something wrong with your business?" Hearing Shane's words, Andy lowered his eyelids slightly and smiled bitterly. "Actually, if it was just a simple business issue, I wouldn't be so worried. Even if the business fails, even if I fail the test for my family, so what? I can't inherit the family property, but I can also start my own business. I am confident that even if I finish college and start from scratch, my life will not be bad. I am confident and want to compete, just because I don't want to do it. I thought I would fail, but I never thought that the ultimate reason for my failure would be that a friend I grew up with would betray me for such a small profit, and would join the ranks of those who framed me." Shane looked at Andy and understood why he was acting like this. "Who is the person you were talking about who can make magic potions? Is he your friend?" Andy has been working with several students at Hogwarts for a long time, and Shane is one of them. Of course, Shane's abilities are among the best among these people, whether it is the speed of brewing potions or the success rate, and more importantly what's more, he can also concoct some high-end magic potions. There is another person like this beside Andy. He is Andy's friend since childhood. He has been buying and selling magic potions with Andy at Hogwarts from the beginning. These are all things that Shane knows, but there are also things that Gen N doesn't know. Last year, the other party used training difficulties as an excuse to reduce the supply of magic potions. Andy had no doubts, so he started looking for partners. Many partners were repelled by Dorian and the dead Tarquin, but it was Andy who found Shane later. In fact, Andy's friend at that time had already accepted the benefits Dorian offered to reduce the supply of potions under Dorian's persuasion, but he was unwilling to give up the benefits Andy's friend had brought to him. So I kept it from Andy and continued to be friends with Andy. This year, Shane and Andy's cooperation went further and further, and Andy's business grew bigger and bigger. Dorian received a death order from Andy's brother to kill Andy this year. Dorian could not after pursuing Shane's trouble, he turned to Andy's friends. Dorian first asked Andy's friends to let Andy expand his business as much as possible, and promised to provide Andy with more magic potions. In order to convince the cautious Andy, Andy's friend even traveled back to last year, saying that he did not give any help to Andy last year, and he must compensate Andy this year, otherwise he will not be able to continue to be friends with Andy. From 1 to 2, Andy finally agreed. On the other hand, he ordered a lot of potions, and there were even many high-end potions in them. To pay for the potions, Andy's friend used the excuse that he needed to buy some special materials. Was about to leave from Andy, and shortly before the delivery of the potion, Andy's friends completely avoided him. Finally, Andy found out the truth through his own channels, and because of this, he was hit and completely depressed. Shane looked at Andy. After listening to all the details he told, Shane sighed and said, "Andy, I don't know whether to praise you for being sincere to your friends without arousing the slightest suspicion, or whether to scold you for such a simple scam. You can all be fooled, and your mind is filled with the troll's saliva, but I really want to beat you up and make you sober up. Shane is very dissatisfied with Andy's friend's character. If this guy appeared in front of Shane now, he might not be able to help but beat him up and smash his head. Andy, take your time. Tomorrow I will help you fill the hole in your funds. You pay off those people's money first. As for the money I will help you make up, take your time and just give it to me before school. Andy looked at Brace. Of course he knew that Brace's family fortune was quite astonishing. Although the money he owed Brace's mother was not much, it was not Brace's own money after all. Even Andy knew that Brace had been spending it until now. The money left to him by his biological father and the inheritance his mother inherited from her husbands who left their hometowns have not touched Brace at all. Now that it comes to this, Brace is of course ready to ask his mother for money. The corners of Andy's mouth twitched slightly. He wanted to say something, but he didn't say it. Shane looked at Blaze, then looked at Andy. Andy might know what happened to Blaze, and Shane naturally knew it too. He looked at Blaze, who seemed calm and relaxed, and sighed, his eyes gradually becoming determined. Clearly having made a decision, he looked at Blaze and Andy and said, well, if we really lose money, that means we admit defeat, and I don't want to end up doing two despicable things. Lose. Andy, give me the list. The list of magic potions, you must deliver. Why are you doing this? Give it to me quickly, don't talk nonsense. If you don't give it to me, I will beat you. Andy pulled a list from his desk drawer and handed it to Shane. Taking the list, Shane looked at the magic potion on 677 and couldn't help but take a breath and muttered to himself. This guy is still very cruel, he is afraid that you won't die, and you really can't die. Andy smiled bitterly and sighed helplessly. Shane read it over, sketched out a number, stuffed the list in his hand, then stood up and said to Brace and Andy. Okay, Brace, come with me. Andy, take a rest. If someone comes to see you tomorrow if you want the potion, tell them it will be delivered on time at 12 o'clock tomorrow and ask them to wait for a while. At this time, Andy also realized what Shane wanted to do. He immediately stopped in front of Shane and said, Shane, there are too many magic potions. You can't. 0. Be obedient and don't talk nonsense. It will slow down the case. Okay, have a good rest and prepare to deal with these guys tomorrow morning. As for the rest, leave it to me and Bryce. After saying this, Shane stopped pacing. The two of them and Blaze, who was slightly confused, walked out of Andy's room, walked out of the Slytherin lounge, and went straight to Snape's office. Shane reached out and knocked on Snape's office door. At that moment, Blaze dodged with lightning speed. Obviously, even Slytherin snakes didn't want to be alone with their Snake King all the time. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 163. Old textbooks. Looking at Blaze helplessly, Shane felt that Blaze's performance was a bit exaggerated, because the dean was nothing more than indifferent, tough, poisonous, terrible, and had double standards. He was otherwise very good, so there was no need to act like this. Exaggerate. Come in. The words were as brief as ever. Shane opened the door and walked in. Snape frowned slightly when he saw that the person who came in was Shane. Although Shane could be said to be his most admired student in Slytherin, Snape was troubled by Shane's ability to cause trouble. He looked at Shane, he said dryly. If you have anything to do, tell me. Professor, I would like to borrow a batch of potion ingredients. Hearing these words, Snape's already ugly face became even more ugly. At that moment, Shane suddenly felt that he could understand Blaze. Snape is scary now. Shane took a step back, pressed his lips tightly, and said with some embarrassment, inside, Professor, I will let him come back, just 1 week, nothing else. Mr. Belstead, do you know what you are talking about? Shane took a deep breath, looked at Snape and said seriously, Professor, I know what I'm talking about, I really need a batch of materials now. Isn't what Mr. Morgan has given you enough to satisfy you? Shane was not surprised that Snape knew about him and Andy. Although Snape seemed to be the kind of dean who didn't like solving student problems at all, he knew everything about Slytherin and couldn't hide anything. Get through Snape's eyes. Professor, Andy has been very embarrassed recently. He is my friend. I don't want him to get stuck in the quagmire because of all the dirty things in the pure blood family. I want to pull him back. You know, Mr. Belstead, the information I keep here is not only my own, but many of them were purchased with funds from the school. I am only taking care of them temporarily. I will refund the material fee from the school in advance. I won't embarrass you, Professor. Golden Cross report before graduation. Upon hearing this, Shane immediately breathed a sigh of relief, smiled and said to Snape, Thank you very much, Professor. Take him away quickly, leave quickly, don't bother me. Okay, take it. Shane was not polite. He immediately walked to the cabinet on the wall of Snape's office to pick out the materials he needed. All the materials here are quite expensive, so Shane selected carefully. Fortunately, the list of high-level potions is not very large, so Shane only selected 9 materials to complete the selection. The remaining low-level materials are all next to the potions classroom. In the storage room, Shane got Snape's permission to go there and pick. Professor, I am going to the warehouse to disturb you. Shane looked at Snape, bowed to him, and then immediately left Snape's office. Carefully closing the door to Snape's office, Shane exhaled. He knew very well that Snape must have made an exception for him. If it had been anyone else, it would have been nice not to be kicked out of the classroom by Snape, let alone Snape. Now there is no cynicism or even harsh words towards Shane. Shane suddenly feels that the Dean's reuse is not a good thing for him sometimes. The number of entries for the Goldsmiths Awards keeps growing, but... Shane, I really admire you for walking out of the Dean's office alive. Shane ignored Blaze and immediately stuffed a bag of these materials into his hands, and then said, "Tonight, give me 100,000th of your mental power. If it doesn't work, drink the mental power recovery potion like water. Go down, I need to prepare all the magic potions on the list from tonight to noon tomorrow." Shane, even one night and one morning might not be enough, right? Of course, time is tight. I won't just brew one potion at a time. Okay, that's enough. Let's go to the potion class later. I'll choose the ingredients and you can help me sort them. Okay, leave it to me. They opened the door and entered the magic apothecary class. After opening the warehouse in the magic apothecary class, Shane walked in and immediately began to select various materials. These materials were of relatively low grade, but in large quantities, enough for Shane to brew a large number of low-level magic potions. Bryce stood behind Shane, sorting the materials. Shane handed him into small bags and then into large storage bags. They have packed their luggage and are ready to leave. Shane took the lead and walked out with his bag on his back. Bryce also followed him with his bag on his back. However, Bryce's bag was a bit heavy. When he left the warehouse, he accidentally tripped over the doorframe and stumbled out, bumping into someone next to him. The locker shook with a clang, and some old books and various items inside were kicked open and scattered outside. Seeing things fall out of the closet, Shane immediately put them back, checked to see if Bryce was injured, then knelt down to pick them up and put them back in their place. Pick up the old books and sundries that fell on the floor and put them back in the closet. At this moment, Shane suddenly heard Bryce let out a slight scream and said in a somewhat coquettish voice, "There are some interesting things in that book. I don't know who it is, but he gave it to himself. It's weird to be named after a half-blood prince." Half-blood prince? When he heard the name, Shane was stunned for a moment, but then he reacted and turned to look at Blaze, only to see that he was holding an old potions textbook in his hand. Shane already realized who this textbook belonged to. "Bryce, show me." Bryce was not very interested in textbooks. When he heard that Shane needed textbooks, he gave Shane an old textbook and started picking up old textbooks and debris scattered on the ground. Shane stood up and started to flip through the textbook in his hand. After flipping through it for a while, he finally found what he wanted. He saw some magic written on this old textbook. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 164 Despicable Villain. Everyone has S2, and Slytherin's Snake King is no exception. If Shane mentioned this matter in front of Snape, he would definitely be hung upside down in the Great Hall of Hogwarts by his dean for 3 days and 3 nights. No one, not even Dumbledore, could intervene. Shane wasn't going to tell anyone that he found the old textbook, so he just hid it in his pocket. "Shane, do you know who this textbook belongs to?" They have known each other for more than a year. Blaze noticed the look in Shane's eyes and immediately guessed that his friend might know something about this ancient book. Shane didn't hide it from Bryce. He nodded slightly and said, "I probably know whose book that is." "Whose?" I have to say, Bryce is really curious about whose old textbook he belongs to, and he is especially curious about who can claim to be a mixed-race master. If nothing unexpected happens, that old book should belong to our dean. The smile on Blaze's face froze. He immediately stood up and stayed away from the ancient book, just like it was some terrible black magic. He didn't want to stay away from it right away or get close to it at all. Noticing Blaze's expression, Shane shook his head and said with a smile, "Blaze, it's just a book, what's so scary about it? Anyway, it's none of my business. I've never read this book, and I don't know anything about the Half-Blood Prince. If you want to read it, you can keep it, it's none of my business." Shane smiled and put the old textbook into his school bag. He couldn't remember where this old textbook was before, but now that he found it by accident, there was no reason to let it go. What is precious is not only the upside-down golden hook and the shadowless sword, but also the magic created by Snape himself, and the potion brewing process that Snape himself improved. These are very precious things, and there is no reason to let them go. Pass. These things are very precious, so there is no reason to let them go. Okay, everything is ready. Let's go to the House of Request. We have to stay there for a while today. I'll help you whatever you tell me to do. It was getting late at this time. In order to avoid being discovered staying up all night, Shane used an illusion to hide himself and Blaze, and quietly came, to the house in front of the Room of Requirement. This time, Shane changed his request. His request for the Room of Requirement was a room that allows him to make multiple potions at the same time. Pushing open the door of the Room of Requirement, and walking into the room, Shane looked around and couldn't help but let out an exclamation. In the center of the Room of Requirement, there is a round table with 5 crucibles on it. Each crucible is equipped with some tools and shelves for storing materials to make Shane's work as easy as possible. Okay, everything in the place are ready, let's get started. Which magic potion to brew first? While you're in a good mood, do the things that will cause more trouble first. The Great Hall is the common room of Hogwarts. In addition to 3 meals on weekdays, everyone can come here to rest or socialize. Okay, let's get started. 5 crucibles, 5 potions. Shane placed the ingredients for the 5 potions on the shelf next to each cauldron in turn, and then began to process the materials one by one with a knife or other fortifications. His face tightened slightly, and Robbins grinned a lewd smile and said, "Andy, don't talk about designs. There are some things I have to consider for myself. I'm not you. Even if I fail, there will be a way out in the future. I can't fail. So I have to think about myself, although I feel a little sorry for you, but there is nothing I can do about it." Looking at his interlocutor, Andy said helplessly, "Robbins, if you have nothing to do, please don't appear in front of me. I don't want to see you again." Robbins is a thin boy. He wears a pair of glasses, his hair is messy, and his face is a little gloomy. He looked at Andy and said, "Andy, if you are willing to completely give up the inheritance rights of the Morgan family, then I can guarantee that I will compensate you immediately for those magic potions you owe. Even after you graduate, you can spend time at Hogwarts smoothly. In the future, you can also run a store with peace of mind and have no worries about food and clothing. You know I am very envious. Such a life, it's a pity that I just come from a small family in decline. I don't have a bright future like your family. Okay, we are strangers from now on." The two of them were so fascinated that they drank the mental recovery potion tiredly, curled up on the edge of the sofa and rested for a while. Without any time to think about it, the two of them brewed it from the finished magic potion. But as the magic potion was brewed, Shane the error rate gradually became higher and higher, even reaching a non-standard rate of 40%. After drinking 2 mental recovery potions in a row, Shane rested for a while, then got up and started brewing magic potions. The magic potions below are all relatively simple magic potions. They are not troublesome to brew, and because of the large amount, 5 crucibles are needed. What is brewed is a magic potion, and the speed and accuracy of the conveyor belt operation become very high. Robbins's face became completely ferocious. He looked at Andy, was silent for a while, and then snorted coldly. "Very good, then I will see what consequences your persistence will bring. I hope you won't regret it." I don't know how long I lay there. Andy heard a noisy splash from the public area outside the room, then got up and changed his clothes, washed and freshened up, left the public area, and went straight to the auditorium. Therefore, Andy's daily transactions are carried out in the auditorium, where he waits for people who buy magic potions from him as always. After the ingredients were processed, Brace lit the fire, and then, under Shane's guidance, put the various ingredients into the crucible, and Shane then boiled the crucible. "Is this why you set me up with Dorian?" Shane and Brace quarreled all night, and Andy couldn't get any rest even in the room. He tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. If Shane hadn't told him to deal with the customers who bought magic potions tomorrow, he would have been late until noon. Dee forced himself to order himself to sleep for 2 hours without rest. He might really spend a sleepless night. In any other situation, such an indicator of inferiority might be a source of joy, but in Shane's case, it proves that Shane is very tired. However, Andy did not wait for the person who came to buy his potion, but instead waited for the person he least wanted to see at the moment. Andy, things are still changing. Ads by Big Gear. Chapter 165. Siege time gradually passed, and someone approached the auditorium. At first, these people behaved normally. They asked Andy when he would deliver the potion. The answer was that Andy said he could deliver it at noon. He didn't respond. He promised to pick up the potion at noon and then left. Today is Sunday, and many people everyone has their own things to do, and they won't be waiting in the lobby all the time. But gradually, someone came up to Andy impatiently and asked about the potion. Although they had been promised to drink the potion at noon, they sat in the auditorium and looked at Andy from a distance, obviously out of place. It could be said to be a fluke for 1 or 2 people, but as more and more people experienced this situation, Andy also felt that something was wrong. "Andy, are you sure you can complete this transaction? If not, you can return the money to me. If the transaction fails, we will cooperate next time." Andy glanced at the other person. He was a 5th grade student of Hufflepuff. He and Andy had done many things on weekdays and were considered acquaintances. Andy had also given him some discounts in the past. Now that he saw the other person's appearance, Andy immediately said warily, "Who said this to you? These people were just like you before. They really wanted the magic potion, but they really couldn't ask for a refund. We have cooperated so many times, and I have never taken advantage of you, even I have had a crush on you many times. For the sake of our previous cooperation, please tell me who told you what." Another member looked at Andy, pressed his lips, sighed, nodded and said, "Indeed, someone told me, or there have been rumors since this morning, that you privately spent the money we had in advance. The goods were delivered and the magic potion was not picked up for us, so another participant and I came here to find you." Hearing this, Andy realized that it was very possible that the despicable Dorian with the suppuration on his feet was behind it. If it were yesterday, Andy might admit all this and give up his inheritance rights. Find funds from home to plug the hole. But yesterday Shane and Brace said everything would be ready before noon. Andy believed their words, so he took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and said to his interlocutor, "Don't worry. This is just a rumor. Although I encountered some things, I will definitely send it to you on time at noon." At this point, Andy's voice became louder and he said to the people around him, "There are others. I admit that I have encountered some problems, but I have solved them. Please don't worry, I will definitely be there at noon. The potion was delivered to, on time, please rest assured." Andy's dry words had a big effect. Although the people around him were still a little skeptical, they were able to calm down more or less. Seeing Andy, a look of disdain appeared on Robin's face. In his opinion, unless Andy could find someone to make all the magic potions last night, it would be impossible to send him out, but now he doesn't. If you need to say anything else, just wait here to watch the joke. Needless to say, Dorian's ploy was quite insidious. He had Robins take the payment before delivering the magic potion, thereby eliminating any possibility of Andy's success in terms of both the payment and the materials. Andy, if you don't have the magic potion, just return the money to us. Considering that the previous cooperation was quite pleasant, we won't embarrass you. Those who bought magic potions also came here, preparing to get their own magic potions from Andy. Although Andy said it was not yet noon, it was already close to noon. Many people were already a little suspicious at this time. When they saw Andy's delay in delivering the potion, they became furious. Haven't seen you for a long time. Therefore, even if Andy could find money, he had no way to leave Hogwarts to buy materials. In the end, Andy could only fail and completely lost the ability to continue doing business in Hogwarts. When the people around him saw his actions, they immediately stood up and gathered around. Originally, they could sit and wait to talk at noon, but seeing this man's appearance, they could no longer sit still. Just like what the man just said, if there were rumors, if it's true, then Andy won't be able to pay back everyone's money. However, before the interlocutor could reach out to grab him, Shane reached out and grabbed his wrist, pinched lightly, and made the interlocutor kneel to the ground. At this time, Shane looked down at the interlocutor, his light gray pupils indifferent. Looking at the position that looked like his own dean, he asked in a deep voice, "Do you still need the potion I have brought? Stop delaying. We heard that you spent all our money in advance for your own personal gain. It's impossible for you to pay back all the money here. Give me my money now, right now." I said until noon, there is still time until. But at this time, no one listened to his explanation anymore. They had already concluded that Andy wanted to refuse to pay the payment and continued to ask for money from Andy. Finally, one of them got emotional and punched Andy in the face, followed by others waving their fists, and their sense seemed to disappear from them. Andy stood up and continued to explain that he would have things ready for everyone by noon. When did Hogwarts students learn to gang up on their classmates when they can't even duel? As he spoke, the man stepped forward and grabbed Andy's robe, asking Andy to pay back the money immediately. In his opinion, Andy could not return everyone's money. He had a chance to get his own money first. As for other people's money, it had nothing to do with him. The crowd looked at Shane standing in front of Andy. Some people recognized him, and some didn't. Those who recognized him immediately took a step back, while those who didn't recognize him immediately came over and tried to grab Jen N's clothes. "Zero, please give me flowers." Just as the fist hit the back of Andy's head, a hand stretched out from the crowd and grabbed the fist. With a little force, the person holding the fist threw it out and hit the wall behind him. Then the hand he grabbed Andy's shoulders and pulled him out of the crowd with one hand. Gradually, students from Tuda College came here to have lunch. The first person led the way. Gradually, Andy was surrounded by people, and everyone was asking him for money, seemingly forgetting that Andy had said he would arrive before noon. Ads by Big Gear.